You're listening to Shine On Policycast, SolarPower Europe's podcast that brings you EU solar policy updates in 10 minutes or less. I'm your host, Bethany Meban, Head of Press and Policy Comms at SolarPower Europe. You can find me on Twitter at SolarPowerBeth. And today we're joined by Annie Scanlan, Policy and Impact Director of Resource, the European platform for corporate renewable energy sourcing. Follow the Resource platform on Twitter and LinkedIn to get regular updates. Hi Annie, welcome to Policycast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So today we're going to talk PPAs, the resource platform, corporate renewable sourcing. But before we get into all of that, maybe you can just introduce the concepts and yourself and the resource platform.
Happy to. Thanks so much. So the resource platform, we are in essence a community of renewable energy corporate buyers and the suppliers of that renewable energy. We really saw a benefit of bringing together the suppliers and the buyers to really accelerate corporate sourcing, particularly of renewable energy. So we do that through events, through shaping the policy environment, and lots of kind of practical workshops and tools for, the average company to really understand what their options are to source renewables. I'm director of that platform, so overseeing all of those activities, working very closely with both the buyers and suppliers, and it's very good fun.
Yeah. And so when buyers are, going out there trying to get their contracts for renewable energy, how do they know it's renewable energy and, what are they looking out for in that sense?
Yeah, so, corporate sourcing, it's a bit of a mysterious topic to some. And I think, now in Brussels, that's really at the heart of the debate. Everyone's talking about these things called PPAs. What is a PPA? So in essence, a PPA is a power purchase agreement. This is a long-term contract for energy, which a corporate, so, steel factory or a food plant will sign with a supplier. That contract tends to run for about 10 to 15 years. And it's a fixed price. So that's really fantastic business-wise that they have this oversight of their energy costs. And of course, then they're protected from the volatile markets, which we've seen, to the extreme in the last couple of years. So that's, makes fantastic business sense. But of course, that also is great for the average company's decarbonisation strategy. So when they sign an agreement with a company providing renewable energy, they can use this to play into their decarbonisation plan, as long as it's underlined with a guarantee of origin. So going to throw in some new terminology here. These GOs, as we call them, are really, really crucial because they're basically the certificates that prove that energy that's being consumed was produced from a renewable source. So solar farm, wind farm, and then that, is really beneficial for the green transition of these companies.
And then they have their badge of honour that their beer or the steel or whatever is produced with green energy, and that's super for their business case and their decarbonisation plans.
GOs, everyone always forgets about them, but they're so
underpinning it all. So you touched upon it there a little bit in your answer, but energy crisis last couple of years, volatile prices obviously pushing demand in theory for PPAs, but at the same time obviously we're seeing government response to the energy crisis and we're seeing market design proposals coming out. And there's different debates there and having different impacts on the PPA market in Europe. So maybe you can just explain a little bit what's happening there and what's that meant for the work of Resource and, the PPA world in the last kind of 24 months.
No, indeed, it's been a real tragedy of the year, right? For the average consumer, impossible energy bills that we never thought that we would have to face. For industries, particularly energy intensive industries where energy is really their biggest cost. There were aluminium factories closing because they just could not compete and still produce on those energy prices. So that's really the sad story of this last year. So very understandably, governments, have woken up to this. There was a feeling that the market was broken, that it was really, something that had to be fixed. I think in essence how we see that crisis, how it played out, it was a crisis of supply. We obviously didn't have the imports of gas that we had. We had shooting gas prices. So this really has disrupted the markets. And of course, we don't like the outcome of that. So very understandable that governments have tried to sort of put into place some regulations to try and help there. And at EU level, the European Commission felt very strongly there needed to be an EU response. So the culmination of that has been this revision of the electricity market design. So anyone in the energy world, this is really, their life. This is my life right now. But it's so crucial that we get this right, because of course we've got to try and sort of cushion consumers from those very volatile markets, but also have in mind that we're transitioning to this world where we of course want as much, and the majority of our energy sources coming from renewables. So that brings in different challenges of how we make sure we have that continued supply,
and making sure that we don't kind of undermine that certainty and that clear path forward for renewables, and connecting those dots there.
Yeah. So I think, for us, really wanting to help companies buy renewable energy more easily, I think that would be our core mission. This is really an opportunity for this to help companies, but also sort of, lay out that path to how we get to that renewables majority grid in the future.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're recording this at a moment where there's been kind of a tentative agreement in Parliament. There's going to be a vote probably next week. So where are discussions now? Are we feeling good about it? Is it going to be good for PPAs? Is it going to be good for this kind of path forward to a majority renewable grids?
Yeah, the caveat being we are talking before this vote and before the council position, so don't hold me to this if it all
what are your predictions?
Gets ripped up next week. But look, we had the Commission proposal, which I think actually was very balanced. Let's also remember we've got elections next year. We're really at the end of the political term, so it's not the moment to be really just ripping up the electricity market. And I think the Commission proposal was right in that way. Very targeted response, really a focus on how can we put in sort of long-term safety nets for companies, really make grids work better, and, how can we really support the renewables rollout? I think this is absolutely right. And there was a PPA article, so this power purchase agreement again, which I think, for us is fantastic, because politicians have really woken up to the fact that PPAs are an excellent tool for businesses, both from a cost hedging perspective and an environmental perspective. So that was a really, really great signal for them. And then, when obviously the Parliament started working on that, politicians in the Parliament are very answerable to their constituents. So I think, a lot of amendments they were making were really with that in mind. How can we help the average consumer, really deliver those low electricity prices that we all want? So that's what we saw coming out of the Parliament. There was a couple of unhelpful things that we thought was, maybe not the right moment to be added in, that we saw things like a kind of EU PPA database. Okay. There was a proposal around, that we'd have to reveal the price structure of a PPA, which is absolutely sensitive information.
It's a corporate business, you can't just,
In essence, could have acted as a disincentive to sign a PPA. We also saw, standardized contracts, whilst it was voluntary, just seemed a bit odd to be trying to sort of regulate what is in essence a market tool. Bits and bobs like that, which we just thought, is this really helping the average company go out and sign a PPA, or actually are we creating new barriers? So in the Parliament, we were a bit concerned with that, but I think how the kind of co-shadows and the rapporteur have worked out a compromise, we think is really an improvement. There's lots of wording on there about member states needing to remove barriers to PPAs at national level, really prioritise unlocking this for more companies. That's great. One thing I didn't mention was that there were some rumblings and rumours and amendments then that came out about institutionalising the market revenue cap.
Okay.
So we've not touched on that yet, but
let's touch on it.
Let's touch on it. This was part of basically the emergency response at national level. Clearly high gas prices meant that there were increased revenues for kind of utility companies in essence. So the cap was introduced as a way to try and kind of claw back some of that money for the public and really help consumers pay their bills. Whilst I think that, seemed like a good idea and, was implemented in many member states, unfortunately, it didn't actually work.
Yeah.
It was a very complicated tool that, how they kind of accounted it and, actually grabbed the money back from these companies. We didn't see any member states really actually getting the amount of money that was expected. And we saw that confirmed in the Commission's report a few weeks ago that basically said that the caps had kind of served their purpose. They're not a long-term tool and in fact hadn't actually been that successful. And the reason that we think that's a really important message from the Commission is really because a revenue cap basically acts as a massive disincentive for investment.
Yeah.
So we saw, for instance, investment in renewables projects go down. In the wind sector, for instance, there was, the lowest amount of wind turbine orders that had been seen for years and years and years. These are real life consequences of disincentivizing investment in Europe.
And you saw that directly impact the PPA market as well?
Indeed. I mean, what I always like to say is the sort of what is going on in the renewables market is the other side of the coin for the PPA market. I mean, if there's a poor environment for new wind and solar farms to be built, there's not going to be enough projects to be signed for a PPA. For these industries to transition, looking particularly at those energy intensives, the amount of electricity they need is eye-watering. I think the steel sector consumes about the same as Belgium. So it's
Quite a lot.
We need so much solar, we need so much wind. So anything that really just spooks the markets and means that we're not really getting those new wind and solar farms is a disaster for PPAs.
Yeah. So now we're kind of moving away from this idea of the cap, and we've got the vote kind of coming in the next week, and then there's a few other dates in market design and in the resource calendar. So what are the kind of next steps into the autumn?
We'd certainly like to see the compromise that was found between the shadows and the rapporteur to be adopted. And then that puts the ITRA committee, they've done their job. We then have a plenary vote coming up probably in September. In parallel to that, the council also still needs to conclude its position. We didn't really talk much about the council, but I think all to play really in the trilogue negotiations. So certainly we'll be keeping a close eye on whether that revenue cap reappears. How would a crisis really be triggered? I think that's also really important to see, so that we're not just perpetually in crisis mode
4 times a year.
Yes, indeed. So I suppose that's on the policy side. It's critical we get that right to really open up the market to more companies to source renewable energy. And what we do from more of a kind of business perspective, we like to organise lots of activities where buyers can really come and learn practical information that will really give them the tools to go out and sign more renewable energy deals. So from the 25th to the 27th of October, everyone's invited to Amsterdam. And we'll have the buyers 3 days as a special first day just for buyers, where they can attend boot camps and really get loads of practical information. Exactly. And then the following 2 days, they can meet suppliers, they can go to a conference and, learn really in detail what they need to know to go out and sign a PPA. They can attend for free. So energy buyers really can come just for that experience to take their environmental and sustainability journey the next step.
Oh, so trilogues will continue into autumn and market design, and resources perfectly placed in October then to bring everybody to talk about it at that key time. And then maybe after that, and maybe after you get a break, we come back and we talk about how it's all landed here in Policycast. But thanks so much for your insights today, Annie. And let's keep the conversation going.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Shine On Policycast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share on social media, tagging @SolarPower EU.